YouTube, we're back with the Airbus A380. Where we left off, we were just testing and we had to repair the EDF that drives this motor. And we successfully were able to address the problem, which was on this connector. And now we're back to, it's about a day and a half later. And I'm going to go ahead and start pulling off the tape so that we can get our temporary covers over our servo channels. You guys can kind of see how this works out for me. Looks like we didn't lose any of our finish at all, which is nice. Well, maybe we did lose a little bit of that clear finish, which is fine. Honestly, it's worth it to me. In this application, I'd rather have a secure motor and a little less finish. And this is just run-of-your-mill packing tape. If you used masking tape, you may not have that problem. Okay, so I had to run and grab my fancy-dancy protector. Oops. Okay, good. So our wires are chased down. We just got a little of that mucilage there. Pretty exciting stuff, guys. And then I'm not sure if you guys remember this from the other day, but we had made some paper pieces that we're going to ultimately serve to cover up our wire access. So we just make sure our servos work before we even dig into that. And that way, if we have to peel out a servo or something, we don't have a big issue. And we'll come back to those two. Awesome. That looks pretty good. I'm happy with the way that turned out. So the next step for us is going to be to by the way, I had somebody comment on my batteries being puffed. I just want you guys to look at what this word says here. It says, starts with B and ends with D. That means bad, okay? So anybody who's used a lipo, eventually you'll have a lipo that looks like this, okay? So, seriously. And this is just a test unit. I just use these things to test electronics. This is what my lipos look like that I'm using to fly. So anyway, here's another example. A little bit of puffing. It's not the end of the world. Okay, people? Don't freak out over stupid details. It's annoying. So anyway, and so if you know who made that comment, if it's you, anyway, I don't give thumbs down in comments. Alright, we need to go ahead and get the radio system turned on so we can control everything safely. So we'll go ahead and do that right now. I actually got an opportunity to fly today, which was cool. I wasn't expecting that to happen. We'll go ahead and just do a single battery configuration because we're not really going for power here. And I flew the timber, got 6 flights in. That was awesome. Really exciting when you get to that spring time of the year. Things are starting to thaw out, and it's just, I don't know if you guys get the same way I do, but we've got daylight savings coming in a couple of weeks, and I am just stoked to have that extra hour of usable daylight. Of course, there's daylight in the morning, but I'm always sleeping in the morning before I go to work, or I'm obligated to be leaving early for whatever. Okay, so here's the servos for the ailerons. Those are actually going to be shared on one channel. So ironically enough, all these Y cables that I thought I'd be getting for free for some other project are going to end up being used. Not a big deal by any means. Just plug those in. Now I have been kind of mulling over in my brain about how I'm going to manage all these cables, and I keep coming back to which one goes on top. So there's just a million cables to deal with here. Alright, so they're plugged in, so we can plug that into the aileron channel of the Lemon RX. Okay, there's aileron. And you'll notice something, guys, the orange wires are at the top of each of these. Okay? That means the signal's on top and then the ground is on the bottom. Alright, so we can go ahead and plug in the battery pack. I am going to actually get rid of any of the debris that might get sucked into it EDF. Did you notice I missed the garbage can? And that's why I'm not playing pro basketball. Alright, so we're in. Okay, cool. So now, I'm going to flip this over. Just being careful to keep things where I want them to be. Okay, so I flipped that thing over, and I've got my radio system on. And so the ailerons are moving. Unbeknownst to me, my camera stopped. Sorry, guys. And so I had just used some heat to poke a hole like this, so I can get in and move my control arms. And this one's actually not too far off. It's pretty close. Oh, and by the way, if you haven't already done this, you'll want to work your hinges. Now, some people will cut these off and go ahead and just put in a hinge material. And to be honest with you, it's probably not a bad idea. But it feels pretty stout, so we're going to see how the servo loads. We can use that to make a decision as to whether or not we're going to do anything about that. That one over there needs to be moved. This one here is fairly close, but I just like to have this done because I always know that you're going to ultimately need to get in there at some point. Okay, so now I'm not sure what they recommend, but I always like the maximum output. And that means that I want to be in the maximum, the farthest out hole here, and then the innermost hole here, which will give me the most deflection possible. Although, there's only so much you can move this thing because the way the wedge is cut. I know a lot of times on this type of aircraft, you end up having anemic roll rates, so it might be wise to trim this out, or to just cut it, and then just put in a hinge material. In fact, I'm just wondering about that because this looks to be a plastic gear servo. Yeah, it sounds like a plastic gear servo. Typically, in my experience, when you've got a plastic gear servo, you don't want to have a heavy load, or you're going to have problems. Okay, so that fits nicely. Surprisingly enough, there's not a huge adjustment there. That's kind of cool. Let's just try it. Did they say in the instructions? I doubt it. And I don't see in the instructions anywhere. Sometimes these things are pretty self-evident. This is not necessarily one of those times. If a manufacturer had an idea, it'd be kind of handy to have. E-Flight, of course, will do that for you. Okay, just in the furthest out hole. Looks like we're almost maxed out anyway. So obviously some advantages to not going all the way to the bottom would be that even though the deflection is less, you'll have more torque available because the leverage will be greater further out. Feels to be a pretty sturdy servo, actually. Okay, well, I'm just going to do like I normally do then. So I'm just trying to get these things square. And let's see how bad it is now. Whoops. Okay, I think we're going to go with the stock configuration on that until we find out there's a reason to have an issue with it. Man, that thing just doesn't want to slide through. Good Lord. I got it, but man, that was really hard to snap in. Okay, good enough. So we've got that one level. Really close if it's not exactly perfect. We'll do this other side. Now this one is where I recognize that my battery was dead. Or not my battery, my phone. I had accidentally not deleted the last video on this series. So my phone didn't have enough memory. It was warning me. Okay, so forceps come in real handy to hang on to things like this in these tight spots. You can also use magnets. Sometimes I make the holes big enough to just shoot the screws through. We'll try that on this one. Yeah, I got it big enough. Cool. You can tell that's one of those super high quality Chinese screws, the ones that don't quite work with the appropriate size screwdriver. Okay. Alright, same thing. We'll go to the... They've already opened up that hole, so we'll use that one. It's really putting a lot of pressure on there because I didn't get a very good Z-bend on here. So I'll show you how I remedy that. Basically, it's just a sloppy Z-bend. Not a big deal. So I'll just take and grab onto these, and I'll just work it back a little bit. Then I'll grab on here, work it back a little bit. Then this is the tricky part. You can also put them in the... I don't know if that's actually called the saddle, but a lot of times I'll find something that I can really get a hold of it. Like this. I'm trying to remember which one has such a good angle for me. I didn't think it was this one. Yeah, it's not. But the idea is when I go to fold this one back, it's going to try to unfold there again. See? Maybe it was just this one. So a lot of times I'll have to bring this in to another pair of pliers, and you can really get it in there tight. And so what that does for you is then you can grab from the other side. You can actually, sometimes you can get the angle. This one's just being a pain in the butt is what it's doing. Of course you could buy a Z-bender too, but I don't like single-use tools. We're getting close. We almost have it, guys. Okay, so we got one angle right. Now I can try to get this other angle right. Okay. And then just a little bit to square it up. Okay, we got it now. So that's annoying, but it's not the end of the world either. So we got that nice and appropriate now. Okay, so we want to go all the way to the bottom hole. I was complaining about the threads on these things when we first, I don't remember if it was the unboxing or one of my early build videos, but they're actually really smooth. Probably because there's not very much thread there. maybe. I'm just going for feel here. Have to turn back actually. I was amazed when I put that ASW28 together. I don't remember having hardly any trim adjustments at all in it, which is crazy. I figured there'd be tons. Any of these plug and flies usually have a lot. And you can see it's kind of almost bending the wing a little bit. Alright, so that's working. Now that we've worked that a little bit, I'm noticing that there's a spot there I don't like. And these are the little things that'll create incessant amounts of drag. So if you can correct them while you're noticing them, it's hard to remember all this stuff before you go ahead and maiden the plane, you know? This one's really bad. It's got a big... I can tell I'm not using a very sharp knife because I didn't cut very good. Alright, great. So we got that done. The other thing is the stabilizer's not on, which I didn't really think a thing of it because we haven't really had any control surfaces hooked up except for that rudder one that we were doing as a test. Okay, so it's on now. Off. On. So what I'm going to do is I'll go in while I'm thinking about it. Servo setup, travel, reverse. And that's on the gear channel. So we'll reverse that. And now it should be on. Off, off, on. Master gain. All the way up. All the way down. So basically, that's how you can get away with not having to use the gear channel, is you basically set your master gain up to the point where it's going to give you enough to have it totally off, even though it's on. See that light's green? It changes to a green and red. And then it changes back to green, and it's green and red. And that's consistent with stabilizer off, stabilizer off, stabilizer on. Off, on, okay? But see, the stabilizer's still on right now, no matter what the master gain is. But you can effectively make the master gain off. You can make the stabilizer off by simply turning your master gain all the way down. If you have auxiliary 3 set to minus 150 and plus 150, okay? So that's why I did that earlier, and I didn't give a good explanation at that point because we didn't have anything to demonstrate it with. So if we go to travel, and auxiliary 3 is at 150 plus or minus, okay? And see there it resides all the way down, and there it resides all the way up, and then all the way down, all the way up, just setting in an oscillation, all the way down. And then I usually run it pretty low. But the idea is, that means that if we would need to tap into some of the useful range on gear, we can actually run the gear. See, because when you pass a certain point, it turns off the stabilizer. What Lemon really needs to do is they need to make another switch that just says stabilizer on all the time. Okay, which would satisfy people that have the higher channel radios. The reason they make channel 5 available to turn the stabilizer on and off is for people with low channel radios. The problem is for guys like me, I would really like to have that channel back to use for other things. So if I only had one dedicated channel for master gain, I could make the changes in my programmable radio. And even if it was still gear channel 5, I wouldn't be opposed to it, but people with a DX7 probably would be. Because the DX8 you would need then to control that channel level. Alright, cool. So we got that done. Ailerons are hooked up and working. Let's go ahead and cover up these wires just to make them pretty. But also pretty in a temporary fashion. Okay, so the way we were going to do this was pretty simple. We were going to use a piece of tape. And we were just going to tape these down in between these areas here, you see. So, like I said, temporary because we're going to be doing lighting eventually. But not so temporary that it looks like crap in the meantime. So there's no reason to really have the battery plugged in for this part. So I'm going to unplug the battery and just pull this out of the way for now. So that we don't have to leave our transmitter on. It's always good to be in the habit of having the transmitter on all the time when you're doing this sort of stuff. So you maintain command and control. Alright, so the way we're going to do this is we're going to lay this down, see what the approximate angle is, then we're going to cut it. Then we're going to lay it back down and make sure we did it right, which we didn't. Then we're going to cut it again. Then we're going to lay it down and we're going to, yep, we're pretty good there. So then at this point we can either put a piece of tape on and hold down half of it, or we can just come down here, get our nice angle. Now on this end I want to actually overshoot intentionally, and that's just going to go up on the inside there. Okay, so that's what we're going to end up with. It's going to work awesome, and everybody lived happily ever after. So now the next step is really simple too. I'm just going to stick it, this just happens to be like a granite countertop, you could put it on something similar. And I'm going to take this piece, make sure it's upright. I'm going to stick it on there in the middle. I'm just going to follow it back. And then I'm going to take my skizzers. I'm just going to cut it back. And stick it here. Pick up that stuff. And then on this end I'll leave some slack so that the tape is useful. Okay. Obviously we don't want to have to go up on the nacelle, so that's why we did that. And then just drop this down in there. Really simple. Simple but temporary. I'm actually very excited to get this wing done because I really want to see how the landing gear thing is going to work out. And the landing gear thing is something that you guys, well, I guess I shouldn't say you guys, you might have done it on your own, but it's not been on YouTube that I know of. Because I always do my investigation before I buy something too. I know why you're watching these videos. I'm just like you. I just waste lots and lots of time filming videos also, in addition to watching lots and lots of videos. Okay, so we got that taped down. I got a couple of bubbles there, which I'm not too fond of, but it'll be fine for what we're doing. So you see how nice that looks? Okay, so I cut two of these as well to do over here. And then I did one the same on the other side. And that's just going to cover up where the servo sits. Okay, so pretty simple stuff. We'll do the exact same thing we did before, except this time I don't know if my tape is quite wide enough. I want my tape to mostly be on the ends anyway. I was actually thinking about doing too wide on this, but that might be overkill. We'll see in a minute. We'll just get the edge lined up nicely. And while we've kind of got control of it, we'll go ahead and cut that down. Stick it in our pile. And I'll do this one wing and then we'll pause it so you don't have to watch the other wing too. It's the same thing, just the other wing. Okay, so we'll... Actually, you know what? We're good with one piece, so I'll just go ahead and use that for the second one. Because I don't think I'm going to be able to utilize that tape anyway. Ooh, dang it. Whatever, that's probably good enough for what we're doing, since it's temporary. Okay. So obviously we don't want to hit that aileron. We don't want any tape on there, on the aileron. I'm just going to trim this down to get rid of this little piece here. Okay. And then since we're going to sneak up into the aileron area, I'm just going to trim this off as well. and just tape it down. You can see the servo, because this big honking black servo adapter, which is fine, and that it's nice and sturdy. Okay, so now this middle one, this one will be again also quite straightforward. Just make our first initial cut so we can line it up there, and then go ahead and get it trimmed to needed. Okay, see what I've done? I just forced it into that crack, and then I have a seam that I can watch, and then I can cut it, because this one's going to be tight. You want this one to be tight. You're probably thinking to yourself, geez, that's a lot of work for a temporary wire cover there, Brian. And yes, I would concur that that is a lot of work for a temporary wire cover thing. But so are half the other things I do. Okay, so I made the mistake of cutting this too short, okay? How the heck did it get that short? I don't remember cutting that much off. Jeez. So what I'll do is I'll actually drop this over here. I can probably use that one. And I just cut 4 of these pieces is all I did. So I'll just use this other long one. And I told you I won't make you watch both sides, but we're not quite done with this side technically, so. There's certain steps, I'm sure you guys have kind of figured this out from watching my videos. There's certain steps where the camera just gets in the way, and this is one of them where the camera's just making it really hard for me to reach where I need to be. So sometimes if you're wondering why I'm struggling so much with what seems like a very easy step, it's because the camera is like hanging out in front of my face. And that's how I can make sure that I try to keep things in focus. Well, I'm probably going to do the same thing I did before. I'm just going to try to do a slightly better job of it. Nice. Okay. So now this is the upright position. And we don't know the upright position because it just fell. I think I know. Let's verify. And yes, it probably does actually matter. I don't know that it's symmetrical. Those engines, hypothetically they should be the same, but who knows if they actually are. Okay, that kind of stuck the way that went off to the side like that, but I think we'll probably be okay for what we're doing. Okay, I'm going to try to put this the other way because I have more tape overlapping, and we'll find out if it's symmetrical too. Well, it sure looks like it is. I bet this film's really bad, guys, because it's like all white right now. The whole, everything is white. So saturation's probably all crappy. Alright, I need another piece there to make me feel warm and fuzzy inside. Now, why am I worried about feeling warm and fuzzy inside on this? Well, because I don't want it to rip off. Okay, cool. So there you have it. And you might notice that I didn't cover up the balsa wood. Well, I don't necessarily want to admit to an oversight on that, but let's just say that if they weren't covering it, I'm probably not going to cover it now. But when I'm all done with all the wires, I'll probably use some vinyl tape to cover that up. I'll take and tape it down, and then I'll just walk back toward the counter and cut thin strips to cover that up with. Alright, we'll pause it and come right back on the other side and see what it looks like when it's done. Alright guys, so that's what it looks like now. It's kind of hard to even show it. I'm trying to adjust the lighting so that you guys can see it. But it's kind of hard to to demonstrate exactly. The saturation gets so intense. But yeah, so that's the way that works. That worked nicely. That should be a perfectly fine temporary solution. And so obviously you can tell that we're going to be able to shorten those landing gear a lot and still clear the nacelles. And here's how you can tell. Because even if those landing gear were out, which they're kind of hard to pull in and out, your landing gear is going to be at least above the bottom of this, and you're almost there, just on the belly. So for sure we should be able to shorten these to where they're just on the nubs, even if we wanted to. So anyway, that's cool. That's very good to know. Then we could hypothetically adjust the nose to agree with the mains too, because the nose will be the easiest one to adjust. Since there's no key, it's just allowed to spin. Okay, so what's next for us is probably to do a little bit of cable management here, which is going to be challenging because I'm not 100% sure where everything is going to sit inside the fuse. So we may actually jump onto the fuse for a little bit, and that way we can get some of that stuff done while we're kind of in the middle of thinking. Oh, one other thing too is, while you've got this glue, I pulled one of these off earlier. You kind of see that little goober? You can rip those off now that they're dry from that mucilage. You'll get those periodically. I don't want to say it's real common, but you will get them once in a while. And they just come off super duper easy. Like there's another little goober. And so you can use a pair of pliers or forceps or even a knife, and they come off perfectly clean. Then you end up with a nice finished product. I just like to get those things out of there if possible. Okay, so I'm going to pause it and grab the fuse. Okay, so by grabbing the fuse, I meant we're going to work on the wing a little bit more. I got the hot glue gun getting hot. We're going to use that to get some of this management done. But in the meantime, I'm going to do just a real quick test. Now that we have all this stuff wired up and working, we can go ahead and we can test our aileron direction, which is kind of cool. So that's correct. That's correct. If you're a noob, do whatever it takes to make sure you've got it going the right way. I tip my body. I've made it into a habit. Now the plane's not flying this way, so don't do it this way. It'll confuse you. Okay, so now differential thrust. We're not going to be giving lots of power here. We're just going to give it enough to get them to go. Throttle cuts off. Okay, so we just make sure that we can feel the airflow. Okay. So you notice there's no change at all. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in here to mixing. And this is our mix that takes throttle to aux 2. So throttle cuts on. So you notice neither of them move. Okay. Now this is going to run both of them up. Okay, so throttle cuts back on just for safety reasons. So now what we need to do is we need to mix in normal. I'm going to go rudder, rudder 2. This might freak out a little bit, so just be careful. Me. Oh, I actually want to do this with the throttle cut off, I think. Okay, throttle cuts off. Now watch what happens. Should be nothing. Okay, yet. See? Now what that's going to do is that's actually backward. So I want this rate to be negative. And I'm going to do a lot to demonstrate how it's supposed to work, because you want to take away a little bit of thrust. Like if we want to yaw the plane this way, okay, we're not going to have anything happening here, but we would increase the flow there, okay? Okay, so I evidently have that wrong still. Okay. There we go. Okay, so as I give it this, that's going to make the motors want to pull the wing over, okay? Now this setting is probably going to be too much. And I don't care which way it goes, you know. There's the up and the down, and then you can go off of the up or the down sweep on that, okay? Or the left or the right. Okay, so now this is going to be super sensitive. Okay, so now with throttle cut, I want that only to be active when switch H is not on. So that's going to prevent it from doing anything. Now switch H is on. Whoops. Okay, so my throttle cut is not on, so it's allowed to work. See, it's already yawing the plane, okay? So now I can go back, and I'm going to make one more mix, and it's going to be normal, it's going to be rudder, and it's going to be to auxiliary to the other throttle. And this time, okay, what did we do on this other one? We went rudder to throttle, negative 125, so this one's probably going to be positive 125. Or it's negative 125 on the other side. It always seems to be the opposite, okay? Okay, now throttle cut is on, but that's not going to stop this from working, so we'll switch that to H. Okay. Nothing. Throttle cut's off. That blows there. Nothing. Okay, so we have the negative sign wrong. So this one's got to be like this. Okay, and we'll clear that. Okay. Okay, so we have that wrong because they're all coming on. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now we want that impact to be the same. So we'll set this to positive 125, and then of course we can back that off later. So now first thing we want to check is throttle cut is on. Differential thrust doesn't have any impact now. Throttle has no impact now. Safety first, guys. Even though these are EDFs, you don't want it to take off on you. Okay, so now we can walk back out. Throttle cut's off. Yaw, 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 yaw. Okay, so I'll stand behind the plane for easy brain work. So that's going to push the plane that way. That's pretty cool. So we could be, oh, and then of course we can give it just regular throttle too. And then when we give it, okay, so throttle cut's on. So now what we need to do is we need to go back into our mixing. And so for each of the controls that we mixed, we'll take away we want about half the output actually. So we'll do like 50 and 100. How about that? So what that's going to do is that's going to make the other side slow down. Okay? And these values get confusing, so you just got to play with it until you get it right. Okay, so throttle cut's off. Giving it throttle. See how it slows down this side? Alright guys, so the memory ran out. Sorry about that. We'll just grab this other pack down here, my other test pack, and we'll give you guys a demonstration of that real quick. Okay, so alright, cool. So now I'll put this up here so you can kind of see what the rudder wants to do too, because the rudder is tied to this channel as well. Okay, so throttle cut's off. We're going to give it some throttle. Okay, so I'll go to the other side so you can see it a little easier for... Okay, so throttle cuts on, keeping in mind that these batteries are not good, so we're not going to get very much use out of them. But I just wanted to show you that it's working. And so basically what you can do then is you can go into your system setup, you can go to mixing, you can come down to this, and you can exaggerate the positive effect, and then you can fine-tune the negative effect, meaning when we give it yaw, I want it to reduce the throttle output less over here, or I want it to increase the throttle output more there. It just depends on how effective it's being for you in the air. And I can tell you right now it's a pretty exaggerated effect. So I'm actually going to drop off the throttle less, and I'm going to increase the throttle less as well. Okay. And then here in a little bit, when we're getting ready to kind of test fly this thing, we should be in pretty good shape. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you have a differential thrust configuration is that you always want to have your main control surfaces tied for differential thrust. Here's why. If you have an Expo, you want Expo to still operate properly. Okay, so we're negative 75 and positive 7. Okay, so those values, don't let them confuse you. Just get one direction set up. Now, if you had reversing ESCs, that would be another thing you would have to kind of battle with. So, all right, so going into differential in Expo, or dual rates in Expo rather. So you notice we haven't set anything. We might as well go ahead and set those now while we're talking about it. I don't care which one we set up first, but I always time to the same switch, switch F, and then I just scroll through and I switch them all first because I always seem to forget how to do that. Or I forget to do that rather. Okay, so for rudder, we're going to set it to like 10%. We're going to set it to 20%, and we're going to set it to 30%. And we're going to reduce the output rate to 90 for the top setting. Meaning that, okay, so the dual rate is going to have to do with the amount of maximum output for the stick all the way over. Okay, the stick all the way over in this case. The Expo has to do with how much output we want to linearize. So like this is linear, it's 100% out, 100% out. Well, at 50% we're even less out, at 25% we're hardly any out, at 10% we're not out at all. And you can tell by this chart, guys. So I always, when people ask me the questions about what Expo looks like, there's literally a chart that shows you the output. Okay, now just so you understand, you can actually do a positive Expo, which means that the middle of the stick becomes more aggressive. As you move out, it becomes less aggressive, which is a little bit weird, but people do it on 3D planes all the time. So the center of the sticks become really sensitive. Okay, so we'll just start with 10, and we'll do 20, and then we'll do 30 for the elevator. And on the top setting, we'll set this to 90. And same for ailerons, we'll just start with, this is the top setting, meaning the highest amount, the lowest amount, the middle amount. That's where we start flying. We can have it quickly if it's too much. We can double it quickly if it's not enough, okay? So it's important that you have stuff for that on your Maiden. Probably going to want a little Expo all the time if you're like me. Okay, cool. So now they're all three set, and what that's going to do is that also is going to help. You may run a little bit higher Expo on your rudder with a differential configuration, so you're not constantly filling with the throttle output. The other thing is, when you run a differential thrust on an EDF, you need to remember, and this is critical, guys, remember, it takes time to spool up and get power out of an EDF, so don't be surprised if it takes a little bit of time. So anyway, with that, we're going to call it quits on this video. We're pretty much out of memory on this anyway, and we'll come back. Next thing we'll do is we'll start going ahead and doing some cable management. Thanks for watching. Lots more to come. We're going to be exhaustive in this video series like we always are. I'm sure that probably drives some of you nuts. If you don't like watching these long videos, just put them in 1.5 or 2 times speed. And anybody who has problems with my puffy packs, send me a private message and we can hook up our addresses, and you can send me some more for me to use in my next video series. Thanks for watching, guys. Check the links below. Buy this stuff, help support the channel. Come back for more. If you've missed a video series, please, guys, go to my playlist. Yes. The playlist will show you every video on a particular plane, including this plane, and the ASH, and the ASW that I just recently reviewed. The Hobby King plane, I did a Hobby King glider. And every plane that I've done, I have a list. The oldest planes, the ones that I did at the very beginning of this experience, I didn't do playlists for, or I did playlists, but they're just one video, or maybe 2. I've gotten in the habit of doing unboxings to Maidens. And then once we've got them flying really good, then I might not film every flight, but I'll film a lot of them. So in case you didn't ever know that, check it out. Click the bell for notifications if you want to be notified when we release our many videos every week. But mostly, thanks for coming back. Thanks for watching.